I watched from my back porch as 3 SUVs pulled up to the edge of my property, and I knew exactly what was coming before the first car door even opened. My name is William Everhart, and I had been living peacefully on my 15-acre property in rural Washington state for the past 8 years. The land sat on the northern side of Miller Creek, a 60-foot wide waterway that carved through the valley like nature's own property line. When I bought the place back in 2018, it came with something special: a privately owned bridge that connected my land to the main county road on the southern side. The previous owner had built it in the 1970s, long before any development existed in the area. It was a simple wooden structure, about 70 feet long, sturdy enough for my truck and built entirely on my property, maintained with my money, and listed explicitly in my deed as private infrastructure. On the south side of the creek, there was nothing but wilderness when I moved in. That changed 2 years ago when a developer bought 300 acres and carved it into a subdivision called Meadowbrook Estates. 50 cookie-cutter houses, each one looking almost identical to the next, sprouted up like mushrooms after rain. And with those houses came the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association. The woman who emerged from the first SUV was named Patricia Hollingsworth, and she was the HOA president. She was in her mid-50s, with severely cut blonde hair that looked like she used a ruler and scissors to maintain it. She wore pressed khaki pants and a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on the chest. 2 other board members followed her: a nervous-looking man named Gerald and a stern-faced woman named Susan. "Mr. Everhart," Patricia called out, waving at me like we were old friends. We were not. I set down my coffee and walked to the edge of my porch. "Patricia, we need to discuss the bridge situation," she said, already crossing onto my lawn without invitation. This was not our first conversation about my bridge. It started 6 months ago when Patricia appeared at my door with a fruit basket and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She explained that several Meadowbrook residents were concerned about the long drive they had to make to reach the main highway. Currently, they had to exit their development to the east, drive 3 miles on winding back roads, then loop around to reach the county road. My bridge, she pointed out, would cut that drive down to less than half a mile. I had politely declined then. I declined the second time she asked. And the third, and the fourth. "Patricia, I have already told you multiple times, the bridge is private property, it is not open to the public." She stopped about 10 feet from my porch, hands on her hips. "Mr. Everhart, we are not asking for much, just reasonable access during daylight hours. The county road is public property. Our residents have every right to access it efficiently." "The county road is public," I agreed. "My bridge is not. You have access to that road. You use it every day, you just have to drive a little farther." 3 miles out of our way," Susan interjected, her voice sharp. "Do you have any idea how much gas that wastes? How much time?" I almost laughed. These people drove luxury SUVs that probably got 15 miles to the gallon, and they were lecturing me about gas consumption. "I understand it is inconvenient," I said, keeping my voice level, "but convenience does not give you rights to my property." Gerald cleared his throat. "We have spoken with the county. They say that if the bridge provides the only reasonable access to a public road, there might be grounds for establishing an easement." Now I did laugh. "The bridge does not provide the only reasonable access. You have a perfectly functional road. And I spoke with my lawyer months ago when this started. The bridge is documented private infrastructure. There is no legal basis for any easement." Patricia's smile finally disappeared. "We were hoping to resolve this amicably. The HOA is prepared to offer compensation. $200 per month for shared access." "Not interested," 500. No, Mr. Everhart, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I am a single person living on private land with a private bridge that I maintain with my own money. You are representing 50 households that want to use my property without my permission. Who exactly is being unreasonable here? The three of them exchanged glances. Patricia pulled out her phone and tapped something quickly, then looked back at me with that artificial smile returning. We will continue this discussion at a more appropriate time. Good day, Mr. Everhart. They left, but I knew this was far from over. 3 weeks later, I received a certified letter from the Meadowbrook HOA. It was not an offer this time. It was a demand. The letter, clearly written by someone who had watched too many legal dramas, claimed that my bridge constituted a public necessity, and that by refusing access, I was engaging in discriminatory practices and creating a public safety hazard. They demanded I grant immediate access to all Meadowbrook residents or face legal action. I took the letter to my attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Martinez, who had handled my property purchase and maintained a practice in nearby Spokane Valley. She read the letter, then read it again, then started laughing. "This is gibberish," she said. "There is no legal theory here. They are just throwing words together and hoping something sticks. So I can ignore it, you can, but they will probably follow through on the threat to sue. Let me draft a response making it crystal clear that they have no standing. Sometimes people back down when they realize they are going to waste money on a losing case." Rebecca sent a detailed letter explaining, in terms even Patricia should have been able to understand, that private property rights in Washington state were well established, that no public necessity existed when alternative access was available, and that any lawsuit would be frivolous. She also pointed out that if they did sue and lost, they could be liable for my legal fees. The response from the HOA came 2 weeks later, and it was not what I expected. Instead of backing down, they had hired their own attorney, a man named Douglas Pritchard, who ran a small practice that apparently specialized in HOA disputes. His letter was longer and used more impressive-sounding legal language, but the substance was the same. They wanted access to my bridge, and they were prepared to fight for it. "Let them sue," Rebecca advised. "We will win. This is actually pretty clear-cut." But the HOA did not sue. Instead, they got creative. I first noticed the signs one morning in late September. They were posted at both ends of my bridge, bright yellow placards that read, "Public Access Route Bridge Hours 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Meadowbrook Residents Only. My bridge. My private property." And they had put up official-looking signs like they owned it. I tore down the signs and threw them in my burn pile. The next morning, new signs were up. I tore those down too. On the third morning, I found Patricia herself at the south end of the bridge with a sign and a drill. "What do you think you are doing?" I called across the bridge. "Posting community notices on the public access route," she replied calmly. "This is not a public access route. This is my bridge. Get off my property." "The area under the bridge is county land," she said. "We checked. I am standing on county property right now, and I have every right to be here." She was technically correct. The creek itself and a small easement on both banks were county property for drainage purposes, but that did not give her the right to post signs about my bridge. "The bridge is still mine," I said. "You are posting false information. We disagree with your interpretation. Our attorney says we are within our rights." I pulled out my phone and called the county sheriff's non-emergency line. A deputy showed up 45 minutes later, a young guy named Matthews who looked confused by the whole situation. "She is posting signs claiming my private bridge is a public access route," I explained. I am exercising my First Amendment rights to post signage on county property, Patricia countered. Deputy Matthews looked between us, then at the bridge, then at his notepad. Sir, is the bridge definitely private property? Yes, it is in my deed. I can show you the paperwork. Madam, if the bridge is his private property, you probably should not be posting signs that say otherwise. That could be considered misrepresentation. Patricia's face turned red. This is harassment. I am going to file a complaint. You are free to do that, madam. But I am asking you to remove the signs for now. She refused, so Deputy Matthews removed them himself and handed them to her. She snatched them away and marched back to her SUV, engine roaring as she peeled out. This is not the first call we have gotten about HOA disputes in that development, Matthews told me. They have been pretty aggressive with code enforcement and stuff. Just document everything, and if they keep bothering you, we can look at harassment charges. I thanked him and went back to my day, but I had a sinking feeling this was just getting started. Over the next month, things escalated in small ways. Cars from Meadowbrook started using my bridge anyway, just driving across like they had permission. The first time it happened, I was in my workshop and heard the rumble of a vehicle on the wooden planks. I ran out to see a silver sedan already across and accelerating toward the county road. I put up a gate. It was a simple farm gate, the kind you can swing open for your own use and lock when you leave. I installed it on the north end of the bridge, right at the edge of my property. No signs, no warnings, just a locked gate across my private bridge. The phone calls started that afternoon. Patricia called twice. Susan called. 3 residents I had never met called to complain. I did not answer any of them. Then my voicemail filled up with increasingly angry messages about how I was trapping them and creating a safety hazard and violating their rights. The gate lasted 2 days before someone cut the lock and drove through anyway. I found the broken lock on the ground and tire tracks in the mud where multiple vehicles had crossed. I installed a heavier gate with a better lock. That one lasted a week before it was vandalized. The hinges damaged so badly I had to replace the whole thing. I reported it to the sheriff's department, but without cameras or witnesses, there was nothing they could do. So I installed cameras. 4 of them, covering both approaches to the bridge and the bridge itself. The footage was enlightening. Over the course of just 3 days, I recorded 17 different vehicles using my bridge. Some were Meadowbrook residents I recognized from previous encounters. Others were delivery trucks, service vehicles, even a mail carrier who apparently thought the bridge was an approved route. And in the middle of the second night, I captured clear footage of Patricia herself, along with 2 men I did not recognize, using bolt cutters to remove my third gate. I took the footage to Deputy Matthews. He watched it, shook his head, and said he would forward it to the detectives. 2 days later, Patricia was charged with criminal trespass and property destruction. The bail was minimal, and she was out within hours, but now there was a criminal case pending. Rather than backing down, the HOA doubled down. At their next monthly meeting, which I learned about through a friendly neighbor who attended, they passed a resolution declaring my bridge a community asset and voted to pursue legal action to force shared access. They also voted to levy a special assessment on all Meadowbrook homeowners to fund the legal battle. $200 per household, generating $10,000 for their legal fund. The lawsuit arrived in November. Douglas Pritchard, their attorney, filed a complaint in Spokane County Superior Court claiming that my refusal to allow access constituted an unconscionable exercise of property rights, and requested the court to impose a private necessity easement, allowing Meadowbrook residents to use the bridge. The legal theory was creative but fundamentally flawed. Private necessity is a doctrine that allows temporary trespass in emergency situations, like crossing someone's land to escape a fire. It does not apply to routine convenience. Rebecca filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that the complaint failed to state a valid legal claim. The hearing was scheduled for January. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the practical reality that people kept using my bridge despite the criminal charges and the pending lawsuit. I installed stronger gates. They were cut. I put up concrete barriers. Someone brought a truck and chains and pulled them aside. Every time I fortified the bridge, the Meadowbrook residents found a way around it, and every time they did, I filed another police report. By December, I had filed 14 separate reports. The sheriff's department was sympathetic but limited in what they could do. They increased patrols in the area, but they could not post a deputy at my bridge 24 hours a day. Then, Patricia made her biggest mistake yet. In mid-December, the HOA sent out a newsletter to all Meadowbrook residents. Someone forwarded me a copy. In it, Patricia announced that despite my selfish obstructionism, the HOA had secured temporary emergency access to the bridge and encouraged all residents to use it freely. She wrote that the HOA board had determined the bridge was a grandfathered public access route that predated the current property boundaries, and therefore my ownership claim was disputed. Every single word of that was a lie. The bridge was not grandfathered, it was not a public access route, and my ownership was not disputed by anyone except the HOA itself. But now, 50 households believed they had official permission to use my property. The traffic increased immediately. Cars started crossing my bridge dozens of times a day. I sat on my porch with a notebook and counted. On a typical weekday, I recorded 37 vehicle crossings. On the weekend before Christmas, it was over 60. I stopped trying to block the bridge physically and focused on documentation. My cameras ran constantly, recording every license plate, every crossing, every instance of trespass. I kept detailed logs. Rebecca assured me this would be valuable evidence, both in the civil case and potentially in additional criminal charges. The court hearing on the motion to dismiss was held on January 12th. I sat in the courtroom while Rebecca and Douglas Pritchard presented their arguments before Judge Ellen Kowalski. Pritchard went first, arguing passionately that the bridge was a vital community resource and that my refusal to share it was contrary to the principles of neighborly cooperation and community welfare. Rebecca's response was surgical. She walked the judge through the property records, the deed, the maintenance history, and the legal precedents. She pointed out that Washington state property law was exceptionally clear on this issue, and that no exception existed for mere convenience. She also noted the criminal trespass charges against Patricia and the ongoing pattern of vandalism and illegal use. Judge Kowalski listened patiently, asked a few questions, then took the matter under advisement. Her ruling came 2 weeks later, motion to dismiss granted. The lawsuit was thrown out. In her written decision, the judge was blunt. She wrote that the HOA's legal theory was without merit, that their claim of necessity was frivolous given the existence of alternative access, and that their continued encouragement of residents to use the bridge despite clear notice of the property owner's objections raised serious questions about the HOA's good faith. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. After the dismissal, Patricia called an emergency HOA meeting. I learned about it from that same friendly neighbor, a retired teacher named Margaret who lived in Meadowbrook, but was appalled by the HOA's behavior. She attended the meeting and recorded it on her phone, then sent me the audio file. In the recording, Patricia's voice was strained but defiant. The judge's ruling does not change the fact that we need access to that bridge. Mr. Everhart is not being reasonable, and if the courts would not help us, we need to take matters into our own hands. What are you suggesting? Someone asked. I am suggesting that we continue using the bridge as we have been. He cannot stop all of us. If enough people use it regularly, we can establish a prescriptive easement. In Washington, if you use a property openly and continuously for 10 years, you can gain legal rights to it. She was technically correct about the concept of prescriptive easements, but she was missing a crucial element. The use had to be without permission, but also without significant objection. I had been objecting loudly and consistently, filing police reports and taking legal action. No prescriptive easement would apply, but the HOA members did not know that, and Patricia was either ignorant or deliberately misleading them. What about the criminal charges against you? Another voice asked. A misdemeanor. My attorney says it will probably be pleaded down to a fine. It is worth it to protect our property values. If we cannot use that bridge, it will affect home prices in this community. That was the real issue, I realized. Patricia was not just being stubborn or petty. She was worried about money. Meadowbrook Estates had been marketed as a convenient, accessible community. The developer had emphasized the easy access to major roads in all the sales materials. If buyers found out they actually had to drive 3 miles out of their way every day, it would hurt resale values. The HOA board, and Patricia in particular, was desperate to avoid that. After hearing the recording, I discussed options with Rebecca. Can we get an injunction? I asked. Probably, but it is hard to enforce. You would need to catch specific people in the act and hold them in contempt. With this many potential trespassers, it is like playing whack-a-mole. What if I make the bridge unusable? She paused. Explain. The bridge is made of wooden planks laid across steel I-beams. The beams are permanent, but the planks are just bolted down. What if I removed the planks? No one could cross, and I would not be destroying anything, just exercising my right to modify my own property. Rebecca thought about it. I do not see any legal problem with that. It is your bridge. You can maintain it, modify it, or even demolish it if you want. Just make sure you are not creating a hazard. Put up warning signs, maybe some barriers so no one accidentally drives off the beams. And if they complain, let them complain. They have no legal right to use the bridge. You do not owe them anything. I spent the next week planning. The bridge was about 70 feet long and 12 feet wide, with planks running across 12 parallel I-beams. The planks were thick pressure-treated lumber, each one 12 feet long and bolted down with lag bolts. Removing them would be labor-intensive but not particularly difficult. I had the tools and I had the time. On February 3rd, I started work. I began at the north end on my property and started unbolting the planks. Each one took about 10 minutes to remove. 4 lag bolts, then lift the heavy plank and stack it. I worked steadily, and by the end of the first day, I had removed about 20 feet of planking from the north end. The first complaint came that evening. Patricia called and left a voicemail demanding to know what I was doing. I did not call back. The next morning, she appeared at the bridge with Susan and 3 other HOA members. By that point, I had removed another 10 feet of planking. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" Patricia shouted from the south side of the creek. I was on the north side on my property with a socket wrench in my hand. Modifying my bridge. You cannot do this. People need to use this bridge. No, they do not. They have another route, and this is my property. I can modify it however I want. This is sabotage. This is malicious. No, this is property maintenance. I have decided the bridge needs repairs, and I am starting by removing the old planking. You are doing this to strand us. I set down my wrench and looked across the gap at her. Patricia, you have another way out of your neighborhood. You have always had another way. You just do not like it because it is longer. That is not my problem. The HOA will sue you again. The HOA already sued me. You lost. You want to waste more of your members' money. That is your choice. Susan stepped forward. We will get the county involved. This bridge might be a vital access route. They could force you to maintain it. The county already knows about this bridge. It is documented as private infrastructure. They have no authority over it, but feel free to call them. They did call the county. A county engineer showed up 2 days later, looked at the bridge, reviewed the property records, and confirmed what I already knew. It was my bridge, and I could do what I wanted with it. He did recommend that I put up barriers and warning signs to prevent anyone from accidentally driving onto the exposed beams, which I had already done. I continued working. By the end of the first week, I had removed about half the planking. The bridge was now completely impassable. Even a pedestrian would have trouble crossing on the narrow I-beams. I stacked the planks neatly on my property, covered them with tarps, and kept working. The reaction from Meadowbrook was immediate and intense. I started getting threatening phone calls. Someone spray-painted "selfish bastard" on the county road near the bridge entrance. My mailbox was knocked over twice. The sheriff's department took reports, but had no solid leads on who was responsible. Then the local news got involved. A reporter from a Spokane TV station contacted me, asking for an interview about the bridge dispute. I declined, but they ran a story anyway, interviewing Patricia and several Meadowbrook residents who painted me as an unreasonable hermit who was punishing an entire community over a petty grudge. The story was absurdly one-sided. They showed footage of the dismantled bridge, then cut to interviews with frustrated residents talking about their long commutes and how much money they were spending on gas. Patricia gave a tearful interview claiming I was destroying community cohesion and making life harder for families with children and elderly residents. What the story did not mention was that the residents had been illegally using my property for months, that the HOA had encouraged this illegal use, or that they had already lost a lawsuit on the issue. The story presented it as a simple case of a selfish property owner versus a reasonable community request. The story went semi-viral in local social media groups. I started receiving hate mail. Someone created a "Shame on William Everhart" Facebook page with over 300 members. The comments were vicious, calling me everything from a tyrant to a sociopath. A few people dug up my address and posted it publicly, leading to drive-by incidents where people would slow down near my property and shout insults. Through it all, I kept the documentation. Screenshots of the Facebook page, copies of the threatening letters, photos of the vandalism. Rebecca advised me to keep everything and to file police reports for any actual crimes. The situation reached a breaking point in late February. A group of Meadowbrook residents, led by an angry man named Kevin Thompson, showed up at my property one Saturday morning with a truck full of lumber. They announced they were going to repair the bridge themselves since I refused to maintain it properly. I stood on my porch with my phone in hand, already dialing 911. "That is not your bridge to repair. You are trespassing." "This is a community resource," Kevin shouted back. "If you would not maintain it, we will. You set 1 foot on my property and you will be arrested." "It is not your property. The bridge is a public access." "No, it is not. And you know it is not. You are welcome to believe whatever lies Patricia told you, but the courts have been clear. Now get off my land." Two of them started unloading lumber from the truck. I stayed on the line with 911, describing what was happening. The dispatcher kept me on the phone and assured me deputies were en route. Kevin and his friends managed to carry several planks to the south end of the bridge before two sheriff's vehicles pulled up, lights flashing. Deputies Matthews and another deputy I did not recognize ordered everyone to stop. "This is our bridge," Kevin insisted. "We are repairing it." "Sir, do you have the property owner's permission?" Matthews asked. "We do not need his permission. This is a community bridge." "Sir, I am going to ask you one more time. Do you have Mr. Everhart's permission to be on his property?" Kevin hesitated, realizing he was cornered. "No, but then you are trespassing. I need everyone to leave the property immediately." There was some grumbling, but they complied. Matthews took statements from everyone involved, then came to speak with me privately. "This is getting out of hand," he said. "I have never seen an HOA this aggressive. Have you considered just selling the property?" I shook my head. "I should not have to abandon my home because my neighbors refuse to respect property rights. This is my land. I bought it legally. I have done nothing wrong." "I know. I am just saying it might be easier." "Easier is not always right," he nodded slowly. "Fair enough. We are going to recommend charges against Mr. Thompson and the others. Probably just trespassing misdemeanors, but it might send a message." It did not send the message he hoped. Instead, it galvanized the Meadowbrook residents. They saw the charges as proof that I was using the legal system to bully them, rather than the reality that they were facing consequences for their own illegal actions. The HOA scheduled another special meeting, and this time they invited the media. Margaret attended again and sent me another recording. Patricia had gone fully into martyr mode, giving an impassioned speech about standing up to tyranny and protecting our community against outside oppression. She announced that the HOA was considering filing a federal lawsuit claiming my actions violated fair housing laws and constituted a restraint of trade. That lawsuit never materialized, probably because even Douglas Pritchard could not find a way to make that theory work. But the rhetoric kept escalating. In early March, someone attempted to sabotage my property. I woke up one morning to find that someone had tried to start a fire in my workshop during the night. Fortunately, the fire had not caught properly, and only some oily rags were singed. But the intent was clear. I had security camera footage showing two figures approaching my workshop around 2 in the morning, though their faces were obscured by hoodies. The sheriff's department treated it as attempted arson. Detectives interviewed me, collected evidence, and started investigating Meadowbrook residents. The case was still open when the next incident occurred. Someone poisoned my dog. I had a 10-year-old Labrador named Duke who was my constant companion. He was friendly, lazy, and spent most of his days sleeping on the porch or following me around the property. One morning in mid-March, I found him vomiting in the yard. I rushed him to the emergency vet in Spokane Valley, but by the time we arrived, he was seizing. The vet tried everything, but Duke died within 2 hours. The necropsy revealed rat poison in his system. Someone had deliberately poisoned him, probably by throwing tainted meat onto my property. The vet reported it to animal control, and another investigation was opened. I buried Duke on a hill overlooking the creek, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I cried. This was not about a bridge anymore. This was not about property rights or HOA disputes. Someone had killed my dog to punish me for standing up for myself. Margaret came to visit me the day after Duke died. She brought food and condolences, but she also brought information. "There is a group in the development planning something," she said quietly. "I do not know what exactly, but I have heard people talking. Kevin Thompson, Patricia, and a few others. They meet at Patricia's house late at night. I think they are planning something big. Like what? I do not know. But people are getting desperate. Some families are talking about selling and moving because of the commute. Property values are starting to drop. Patricia is under enormous pressure from the HOA board. I thanked Margaret for the warning and increased my security measures. I installed more cameras, motion sensor lights, and even started sleeping lighter, keeping my phone nearby at all times. The something big turned out to be a protest. On a Saturday morning in late March, more than 30 Meadowbrook residents showed up at the county road near my bridge. They brought signs, folding chairs, and what appeared to be a commitment to stay for a while. The signs read things like "Access for all," "Stop property tyranny," and "One man should not control our lives." They were not on my property, so there was nothing illegal about it. They stayed for 6 hours, waving at passing cars and giving interviews to local media outlets that showed up. Patricia gave another tearful performance, this time bringing 2 elderly residents who talked about how the long commute was affecting their health. I ignored them. I stayed on my property, did my work, and let them waste their Saturday standing by a creek. The protest became a weekly event. Every Saturday morning they would show up, wave their signs, and generate a little more media attention. Local news coverage painted me as increasingly unreasonable, a stubborn man who cared more about principle than people. Then someone did actual investigative journalism. A reporter from the Spokesman Review, a proper newspaper rather than TV news, contacted me for an interview. Her name was Jennifer Cole, and unlike the TV reporters, she had actually done her homework. She had reviewed the court filings, the property records, and the police reports. Her story, published in mid-April, was a game changer. She laid out the full timeline, how I had repeatedly declined reasonable offers for compensation, how the HOA had encouraged illegal trespassing, how they had lost their lawsuit, how residents had continued to use the bridge despite criminal charges, and how I had finally removed the planking after exhausting all other options. She interviewed Rebecca, who explained the clear legal principles at stake. She even got a quote from a property rights attorney at Gonzaga University, who confirmed that I was entirely within my rights. The story also revealed something I had not known. The Meadowbrook developer had originally planned to build a bridge as part of the development, but had scrapped those plans to save money, knowing that my private bridge existed nearby. The developer had implied in marketing materials that residents would have easy access to county roads, without explicitly mentioning they would have to drive 3 miles out of their way. Several residents who were interviewed expressed anger that they had been misled by the developer, not by me. Public opinion started to shift. The Shame on William Everhart Facebook page was flooded with comments from people pointing out that the HOA was in the wrong. Several local attorneys posted detailed explanations of property rights law. Some commenters noted that if the HOA had simply accepted my initial refusal and budgeted for the longer commute, none of this would have happened. Patricia responded by doubling down. She appeared on a local morning talk show and claimed the newspaper article was biased and that I had clearly gotten to the reporter. She insisted that the bridge was a public necessity and that she would continue fighting until justice was served. Her criminal case for the gate vandalism went to trial in early May. It was a simple bench trial before a district court judge. The evidence was overwhelming. My security footage clearly showed her cutting the lock. Her attorney tried to argue necessity, claiming she had a good faith belief that the bridge was public property, but the judge was not buying it. She was convicted of criminal trespass and malicious mischief, sentenced to 30 days in jail, suspended, and ordered to pay restitution for the damaged gates plus a $1,000 fine. She was also removed from the HOA board by a vote of the Meadowbrook residents. Apparently, having a criminal conviction related to the bridge dispute was too much even for her supporters. A new board was elected, led by a reasonable man named Tom Fisher, who reached out to me almost immediately. "Mr. Everhart, I want to apologize for everything that has happened," he said when we met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Spokane Valley. "The previous board went way too far. What happened to your dog was unforgivable. I want you to know that the new board does not support any of that." "I appreciate that," I said cautiously. "I also want to be realistic with you. We do not have a legal right to your bridge. I understand that. Our attorney has made it clear. But I am asking if there is any possibility of working something out. Not because you owe us anything, but because it would benefit both sides. I am listening. We have had 3 families move out because of the commute. Property values have dropped about 8%. People are angry, and not just at you anymore. They are angry at Patricia for escalating everything. They are angry at the developer for misleading them. We need some kind of resolution. What are you proposing? What would it take for you to rebuild the bridge and allow limited access?" "I am talking about a real agreement, legally binding, with real compensation. We would pay for all materials and labor for the rebuild. We would pay you a monthly fee. We would sign an easement agreement that specifies exactly when and how the bridge can be used, and that acknowledges your ownership and your right to revoke access if the terms are violated. How much are we talking?" "We have discussed up to $50,000 for the rebuild, depending on what is needed, and $1,000 a month for access rights." I sat back and thought about it. $50,000 would build a much better bridge than the old wooden one. $1,000 a month was $12,000 a year, enough to cover property taxes and then some, and a proper legal agreement would protect me from future disputes. "I will need to talk to my attorney," I said, "but I am willing to consider it on one condition." "Name it." "Full written acknowledgement from the HOA that I was within my rights to remove the bridge, and a public apology for the harassment, vandalism, and the death of my dog. I do not care if you cannot prove who did it. The HOA created the environment that led to it, and I want that acknowledged." Tom nodded slowly. "I will bring it to the board. I think we can do that." 2 weeks later, I sat in a conference room at Rebecca's office with Tom, 2 other HOA board members, and their new attorney. We negotiated the final details of an easement agreement. The HOA would pay for a professional engineer to design a new bridge, built to county standards with steel and concrete instead of just wood. They would hire contractors to build it. I would retain full ownership, but the HOA would have access rights during specified hours, with restrictions on vehicle weight and frequency of use. The agreement included termination clauses if the HOA violated any terms. The HOA also issued a public statement, posted on their website and sent to all residents, acknowledging that I had been within my legal rights throughout the dispute, apologizing for the harassment and illegal actions of some residents, and specifically condemning the vandalism and the death of my dog. Patricia was named by implication, though not directly, as the source of much of the conflict. The new bridge was completed in August. It was a beautiful structure, far better than the old one. Steel beams, concrete deck, proper railings, and built to handle heavy vehicles. The engineer said it should last 50 years with minimal maintenance. On the day the bridge officially opened for limited use, Tom and the HOA board held a small ceremony. They invited me to cut a ribbon, which felt absurd but also somewhat satisfying. A few Meadowbrook residents attended, and several came up to thank me and apologize for the conflict. "We should have handled this better from the start," one woman said. "None of this had to happen." She was right. None of it had to happen. If Patricia had simply accepted my initial refusal, and the HOA had focused on working with the developer or the county to build their own bridge, this would have been a non-issue. Instead, they chose confrontation, harassment, and illegal action. And in the end, they got what they wanted, but only after spending tens of thousands in legal fees, suffering criminal charges, dividing their community, and causing immense personal harm. As for Patricia, I heard she moved out of Meadowbrook a few months after her conviction. Apparently, she could not handle the social stigma of being the person who had driven the community into such turmoil. Kevin Thompson and the others charged with trespassing for the attempted repair pleaded guilty and paid fines. The arson and poisoning investigations never resulted in charges, though everyone had their suspicions about who was responsible. I still live on my property. The new bridge works well, and the HOA has been scrupulous about following the agreement. They pay on time every month, and residents are respectful of the access hours and restrictions. I even occasionally see some of them walking across the bridge, and we exchange polite nods. I adopted a new dog, a rescue German Shepherd I named Miller after the creek. He is younger and more energetic than Duke was, and he has helped fill the hole that Duke's death left. I still miss my old friend, but Miller is good company. The whole experience taught me something about the importance of standing firm on principle, even when it is difficult and costly. I could have given in early on. I could have let them use the bridge and avoided all the conflict. But doing so would have meant surrendering my property rights because others demanded it, and once you start down that road, there is no end to what people will take from you. It also taught me that organizations like HOAs can bring out the worst in people. Patricia was probably not an evil person at her core, but she got caught up in the power and righteousness of her position. She convinced herself that she was fighting for her community, that the ends justified the means, and that anyone who disagreed was an enemy to be defeated. That kind of thinking is dangerous, and it escalated a simple property dispute into something that cost people their savings, their reputations, and in Duke's case, their lives. The legal system worked eventually. It was slow and frustrating, but the courts consistently upheld my rights. The sheriff's department did what they could within their limitations. And in the end, justice was served, even if it took longer than I would have liked. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had just let them use the bridge from the beginning without any agreement or compensation. Maybe it would have been fine for a while, but eventually there would have been conflicts over maintenance costs or liability if someone got hurt, or 100 other issues. The only sustainable solution was a clear legal agreement that spelled out everyone's rights and responsibilities. We got there eventually, but we took the hardest possible road to reach it. On quiet evenings, I sit on my porch with Miller beside me and watch the sun set over the creek. Cars occasionally cross the bridge, Meadowbrook residents heading home from work or running errands. The bridge is beautiful in the fading light, its steel beams catching the last rays of sun. It is strange to think about everything that happened because of a simple wooden structure across a creek. But in another way, it was never really about the bridge at all. It was about respect, boundaries, and the fundamental principle that your rights do not extend to other people's property just because it would be convenient for you. That is a lesson some people learn easily, and others have to learn the hard way. Meadowbrook learned it the hard way. And I hope they remember it. The monthly payments continue like clockwork. The HOA treasurer, a meticulous woman named Helen, sends them via direct deposit on the first of every month.